Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 96 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level, I am Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How are you doing, Rob?
I'm okay. It just dawned on me something now.
Okay.
I think at episode 100, I need to start doing the intros because you've done the last, 98.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, there was that one time I went on vacation. I went up north.
Oh, that's true. I had to do that. See, I said 98 out of the 100. So when we hit 100, this is going to get weird.
Yeah, it's going to be real weird.
Yeah.
Do you not want me to do the intro?
No, I like you doing the intros, but
do we need to have a band meeting?
No, I think.
Oh God, is the podcast ending? Oh God. He hates me.
I think it's more the fact that you're always asking me how I'm doing, and I'm never truly prepared for that answer. So I need to start turning the tables.
That's because I turn the tables to avoid answering that question myself.
I see. Well, that's fair.
Yeah, it's a power move.
That makes a lot more sense now. Well, hi.
Hi.
Welcome to Storyteller Conclave, where two people have Wednesday nights as our therapy sessions.
Wednesday night therapy sessions.
That's right.
So the topic tonight at hand is dark fantasy.
Yeah, and we're not talking about the fanfic style. We're talking about role playing in the setting of dark fantasy.
Mm-hmm. And so we want to talk about, a little bit about, what dark fantasy is. It's actually kind of a great time. We had this topic planned out a little while ago, way ahead of time, several months ahead of time. But actually, it turns out that Ravenloft is getting a new book.
I saw
Wizards
that.
of the Coast announced it. It's due out May 18th.
Yep. We've got a couple other games that are actually that just did really well on Kickstarter. Grim Hollow.
Yeah.
I saw that was going really well. And there's a few other things that have happened, I guess, in recent time with some of the other settings that we're going to be talking about, where minor adjustments have been made. But again, it kind of rebirthed. So a lot of things have been coming around back to this.
Yeah. It's been kind of one of those topics that's been dancing on the corner of my news feed for several months now, so I think it's going to be good to get around to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So what exactly is dark fantasy? We always start with a definition.
We'll try and handle that.
Exactly what we're talking about here. So dark fantasy is basically like your typical fantasy setting. You're going to have your undead and your vampires and your dragons and werewolves and all that jazz.
The typical things that grant you a fantasy realm of some way. Right.
There's going to be swords and sorcery involved. But with dark fantasy, it's more of a mood.
Yes.
And it's more of a mood, a setting. There's an oppressive pall of gloom over everything.
Yeah, the assumption is made that it's already gone to shit, in the sense that not necessarily the world as a whole, like a post-apocalyptic, but more along the lines of this is we're still moving through this. The forces that came to kick our butts are still here. They may even be controlling the situation and running the game now.
The general conceit in most fantasy is that, people are generally good, or at least neutral in the sense that they're just trying to get along and, such like that. Can be appealed to reason. There are good people out and around, some rulers and such like that. Noble people are generous and kind. None of that really happens in dark fantasy. The general conceit is that people are evil by default.
Yeah, or at least
unscrupulous.
I think that's the better way of putting it, because I'm not necessarily saying that everyone is evil, because a lot of times you'll get within these settings that a certain group, the oppressed group, is doing the best they can to survive. That doesn't necessarily make them evil, but it does make them opportunistic.
It does make them opportunistic, and they may have crossed several lines in just out of the necessity to survive.
Correct.
They've had to make some hard choices.
Yeah, and those that have survived probably did not do it out of the kindness of their heart to help others.
Exactly.
They're doing what they need to do, or might do, and then that's considered okay.
So I would say gray is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
In a dark fantasy setting.
But the stunning lights that do exist there are very bright.
Oh yeah. And then we will talk about contrast later, because it's a major theme in dark fantasy. One thing you're probably asking yourself right now is how does this differ from horror? Because it sounds like I'm describing horror, right?
It really does.
And the key shift is the power dynamic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In dark fantasy, your characters at least still have the power to affect things around them.
Mm-hmm.
They're still the agents of change in the world and in the story.
Yes.
In horror, the power dynamic shifts against the characters, making them the prey animals.
Yeah, think of
making
it
them the hunted.
more along the line. Horror is almost inevitably investigation and chase. Is pretty much all that it is. It is a suspenseful feel at all times. You are the prey.
Yes.
Whereas with just dark fantasy, you're living in a moment where you can still be
You still drive
heroic.
the action. Yeah.
Heroic
Yeah.
in
you
movement.
still have choices to make.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So what are some great examples of dark fantasy out there? So
Your favorite.
Oh, yeah. So a selection of like video games, books, movies, and things like that you might know the dark fantasy feel from. One of my all-time favorites, the Dark Souls, what we call the Soulsborne set. Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne.
Yep.
That whole set of games right there. I've got a little section later where I'm going to pontificate a bit more on Dark Souls, but I kind of want to throw it out there as a reference for that is dark fantasy.
Yeah, but I think for a more general sense, Diablo has been around as a word and phrase, and it's an easy way to get your mind into it. In fact, Critical Role just did a recent piece for Gen Con where they did a setting in Diablo, which was hilarious.
BlizzCon.
I'm sorry.
BlizzCon line.
Yes. Yeah, that was interesting the way they did that, but I thought it was neat who played who in character classes wise.
Yeah, believe it or not, I actually haven't watched it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Go watch at least the intro, because I will say one thing. Matt Mercer does an incredible job of holding the narration and main characters' voices.
Oh, yeah. No, he does an amazing job of that.
It was very wonderful to listen to, and then go back and rewatch the original Diablo, like the original game opening and your character's first initiation in, and then listen to his voice and listen to how hard he worked to make sure it sounded that good. It was very well done.
Okay.
So I have to give him mad props. He is eloquent at his skills.
Okay. I will definitely turn around and give it a look.
Yeah, it made me want to sit there and kind of listen more just for that. And then they went ahead and actually did some beautiful artwork for them, really captured the feel of what was going on and who these people were, and you could feel it in the way they developed those characters. So if you really need to get a good current view of what role-playing in a dark fantasy is, I would definitely go to that as an opening to listen to the characters, the way things are described, just to get a feel for it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's up on. I'm pretty sure it's up on YouTube now.
It is.
Okay, yeah. So
BlizzCon, whatever, was very nice about putting it up there.
Good. Yeah, so that'll be on Critical Role's channel.
I think they actually just released the Critical Role channel version of it, which is much more concise than the other. But you can still find it.
That's what I saw because I subbed to them. Subbed to Critical Role. So,
but another one that I know from history is The Dark Tower, which then became a movie. Not to say that they really have a connection, but...
Well, first off, from video games, we really can't squirt past mentioning Darkest Dungeon.
Oh, that's true.
Darkest Dungeon is probably the darkest fantasy I've ever... So here's the thing about Darkest Dungeon is, I played through the whole Dark Souls series, right? And it was rough at times, you know, but and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Darkest Dungeon was one of those games I took one look at, and I just decided I was not going to play it.
Nope, too much.
It's great. Don't get me wrong; it's a phenomenal game, and I will sing its praises. But it's stressful.
It's stressful and it's very grim.
It's very grim. And just very stressful. And I just watched a Let's Play of it, and that was. Just getting the secondhand fringe anxiety was enough for me, you know?
Yeah. And keep in mind that when we're talking about dark fantasy, we're talking about the fantasy aspect of that, the kind of medieval trope of it. A lot of people will also look to say, well, wouldn't you consider Half-Life kind of dark fantasy, in the sense that you have this oppressive world, it's gone to shit, you still have a heroic struggle going on.
I almost put it more post-apocalyptic.
And that's where I'm saying is that it's not post, it's current, because they're still there. There's still a force to be dealt with, and still heroic things that can happen.
But and that's the thing is.
But it's not fantasy. We're stepped away from that.
Regardless of fantasy, though, I don't know that it's even necessarily dark. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's darker than your typical sci-fi. There are a lot of grim aspects and stuff like that. We've essentially lost the war.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, especially because of who the main character is and how the main character is regarded throughout the game, people are happy to see him, and he's a hero amongst them and such like that. That there's a general sense of hope that what you're doing will affect the outcome. I don't think that a dark fantasy setting necessarily comes with that
that level of hope.
That level of hope. Like I think there's a general idea in Half-Life that you can win,
mm-hmm.
and that things will be okay on the other side.
Yes.
Maybe not the same, but okay.
Yeah, and I think the setting gives you the chance of when you come into it, oh, it's Freeman.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the Freeman. Like, no one's going to do that in a dark fantasy setting. They're going to look at it and go, oh, crap, it's Freeman. You're just bringing more hell on us, aren't you?
Another adventurer who thinks that he's got what it takes to turn this all around.
Well, here's some stuff. Good luck to you.
Here's your last drink. I'll see you at your funeral.
Right,
you
right.
know?
We'll get into that with some of the other things, but yeah.
Aside from for the outcome, though, and this is kind of touching upon the themes that make up dark fantasy, is I don't think that you hope for a good outcome in dark fantasy. I think you break even, or I think you hope to accomplish a personal goal against the backdrop of all this awfulness, but I don't think you hope for a good outcome.
And see, that's where, when I was looking at this and thinking about it, Dark Crystal as a movie, I think it cuts the edge of that very finely.
It does.
Because there is heroicness in it, there is a light in it, there is hope within it, and that hope is not constantly dashed.
Yes.
Even your darkest characters in that, some of the darker characters, come to a realization. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that you're really going to find in dark fantasy.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. That's actually
so
fair.
I think cutting that line of where does dark fantasy become fantasy in a dark setting is where heroics and things like that can happen. So I think that that line can be blurred a little bit, but we're going to focus on what really puts it squarely in dark fantasy.
Now, you mentioned Dark Tower earlier.
I did.
I'm a big fan of the series. It's by Stephen King.
Yep.
It's 7 books in that series. Starts with the gunslinger, if you're not familiar. I would definitely say that's dark fantasy.
Very much so.
And again, kind of touching on that whole, we're not really hoping for a good outcome. The best we can kind of hope for is to break even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hunger Games.
You could make an argument.
You could make
a
pretty strong argument for some of the books, definitely. I wouldn't say all of them, but I would say for some of them, because Dashing Hopes is a huge thing in that, and the whole idea of hope becoming something that is vestigial.
Yeah,
is exposed in that a lot,
or even poisonous.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it more squarely sits than a lot of the other pieces.
Now, one of the other things that sits squarely in the pop culture spotlight, regardless of your feelings of the production from HBO, is A Song in Fire and Ice, otherwise known as Game of Thrones. Well, yeah, but I mean, just...
It is very much in that. It is very dark fantasy.
It's basically the reason I stopped watching it.
Yeah.
It was because it was almost too dark fantasy, and that you couldn't get attached to anybody.
Nope.
Like, oh, hey, I like this guy. Oh,
no, he's dead. He's dead.
Okay, well, no, but this new character that they introduced...
No, he's dead, too.
He's
dead.
Oh. But what about this other character... Arya Stark?
Mm-mm.
Yay! Okay, I can actually like her.
Sort of.
For right now.
But I think she's a perfect example of something that is scrupulous in the world because they have to be.
Yeah.
And we're going to kind of dig into some more other things on that, but I would definitely say that fits because of it. Because of how it portrays even the finest of characters.
Yep.
So,
and you mentioned movies, Dark Crystal. We talked a little bit about Coraline. I know you're a big fan of that.
I do love Coraline. I think that it does squarely fit within that. I think because all of the characters, the moment you meet them, you're believing that there's something wrong there.
Yeah, everybody in that story, down to Coraline herself, is a little grotesque.
Yeah, and just a little bit off that you're not certain that they're good. Mm-hmm. That there's something about them that isn't right. And you have to find the hero within that. I think at the end, in the way that it ends up, you're definitely getting that strong feel that this is more of a heroic story. But I would say that Coraline, strongly fits within dark fantasy style.
Knox is in the live chat saying, I've seen none of these things you're mentioning. Make a list, buddy.
Yeah, if you're interested in dark fantasy.
Especially Coraline.
I think Coraline's perfect.
Coraline's absolutely the softest part of this list that we're making here.
Yeah, it's definitely a gateway.
It is Neil Gaiman, yeah?
Yes.
And so the writing is phenomenal. It's got almost a fairy tale-esque sort of, but it's a grim fairy tale.
Very much
but
so.
It's very, very fairy tale in nature. And it's some of the best stop motion claymation animation you'll see ever.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. And watch it all the way through.
He has seen Coraline.
Excellent. Well, good choice.
All right,
choice.
good. And then Pan's Labyrinth.
Ooh, yeah.
Now, you want to talk dark fantasy.
Beautiful dark fantasy at that. Mixing of worlds, questioning of sanity.
Yeah. Where both the fantastical world and the real world are awful, awful places. Everybody in them are awful, awful people.
Yeah.
And just one little girl trying to just cope with it all. Yeah, that's probably my favorite on this list.
Yeah, there are many others that I would put in that you could get close to it, but the key here is that we're talking about fantasy, and we're not just talking about gritty terror and gritty worlds.
Yeah.
We're talking about the fantasy aspects of that and where it sits. So,
all right, so we've gone through a lot of other media.
Yep.
What tabletop RPGs do we got in the dark fantasy?
Well, you cracked open Ravenloft as something, and I think Ravenloft has been around a long time.
Oh, very long time, yeah.
Yeah, like I can remember it as long as I've remembered D&D. I remember it becoming kind of a household name of like, oh, you mean the vampire module, Ravenloft? Yeah.
Right.
Everybody has an image of what Ravenloft is, where it is, how dark it is there.
We all kind of knew the name Strahd.
Yep. Good old Count Strahd.
Yeah, wasn't there like a Death Knight guy?
I'm terrible with any of their names. But...
Yeah, I can see his face. He had that like sort of kettle helm with the scarves wrapped around the base of it.
He was again one of the funniest parts about that was some of the earliest art of Ravenloft was actually taken or mimicked from Castlevania series.
Was it that Ravenloft ripped off Castlevania, or was Castlevania rip off Ravenloft? I could not remember which one was which.
And that'll be a never-ending battle for I think for a lot of people of what was what.
Overwatch with the save in the
Thank
live
you.
show chat.
I was just gonna say Overwatch would know.
Yep.
Thank you.
I was actually just gonna make the comment. If Overwatch is here, he'll know.
Thank you, Overwatch. But yeah, again, that I would say that Belmont definitely is a hero, a dark hero in a dark fantasy as well. There's less story known there, but there's a lot more going on. The other Vampire Hunter D in the anime.
Yeah.
The original Vampire Hunter D was another dark fantasy that I would say, but Ravenloft kind of encapsulated a lot of that design, a lot of that belief of what a vampiric run world would be like. How would a vampire run a country or a large duchy, if you will?
I think a lot of that comes also down to like Bram Stoker's Dracula. I mean, it's where a lot of the original roots of that were.
And it does.
The vampire myth itself, but he's the noble in the castle up on the mountain that overlooks the town. You know?
Without the romanticism of who Count Strahd is. He knows he's not a romantic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
like
absolutely.
it pulled that aspect right out of it and went back to Vlad the Impaler, who had who was doing what they were doing, and the darkness that followed that, and the people who are like, this is a grim world. Like we are in the worst of the darkness of Eastern Europe during times when everything's shit, and we get kicked off of Apple Music.
But that's two.
That's two. I think we get 4.
Okay.
So we'll make it count. But in any case, it's grim because everyone there knows how bad it is.
Yeah.
It's never a question. It's just a matter of when. Like, you don't go out at night. Why? Because you know you're going to get eaten by wolves or drained by a vampire. You don't have you have a child. That child is in question until they can defend themselves, and even then, keep them hidden, keep them safe.
Yep.
Yep.
One thing I didn't know is I never really got into Ravenloft back in the day. I've talked about before that I kind of only started getting into D&D like really hardcore in 3rd edition, and Ravenloft really wasn't a thing in 3rd edition.
No, it was 2nd. First, pretty strong.
It was very very much a 2nd edition thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, I kind of knew of it by reputation because I know my roots and I know my elders, but
Yep.
but I never really played in Ravenloft, so I therefore never got into it all that much.
Right.
But at least with this new book, they're talking about 30 different realms of
Which is
Ravenloft.
beautiful.
It's going to be called Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. It's a whole setting book, piggybacking off of the success of Curse of Strahd, which is the module. And yeah, apparently there's like 30 different realms there, and they've all kind of got their own dark fantasy theme to them.
Okay.
From Strahd the vampire, with his castle up on the hill, down to a realm that is verging on the edge of a zombie apocalypse outbreak.
Okay.
To ones based off of like Indian mythology and stuff like that, where there are 3 warring evil powers against each other. And,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, so they took, and I think there's an Egyptian themed one too.
Wow.
So like there's a lot of things to offer a dark fantasy setting in this new Ravenloft book. So I would definitely give it a look. Once again, that hits shelves May 18th.
Fantastic.
And it's up for a pre-order on D&D Beyond.
Yeah, I'm actually going to jump because of how you brought into this one, is that White Wolf and Vampire was my gateway into dark fantasy.
Yeah.
And I actually stepped into it initially into contemporary more so, and then fell in love with Dark Ages.
Yes.
And I played Dark Ages with friends, and it was dark, and it was grim, and we were constantly struggling with a world that felt like it was on the verge of falling apart, and trying to keep society together and having this background edge of control. But one of the things that White Wolf did beautifully was paint the setting and paint these characters as whole people.
Yeah. Yep.
That it wasn't just your powers, it wasn't just your set, it was that you were embedded in the society, and that some people who had these tendencies, maybe they were because you were graced by some light, or inspired in some way and crazed in that direction. So you had these shall we say couplings of individuals who wouldn't normally get together, but their common goal made sense.
Right. And that's where you get your coterie from, and such like that.
Yeah.
The one aspect that I really loved about World of Darkness in general is the idea that you had like a humanity score.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people just kind of played it as, hey, let's play crazy vampires and just have some power gamey fun, throwing cars around with our super strength. But I think the intent of the game, if in a lot of especially if you really read the the player's guide,
the lore
of how to play the game, and what they're trying to do with the game.
Oh, right.
Is it's supposed to be a game of personal horror. In that you have been turned into this horrible monster that must take life to survive. And what do you do with that?
Yeah, you're not escaping into vampirism. You're stuck with it.
Yeah, exactly. And so the whole idea of a humanity score was that you have what's called a hierarchy of sins, of lines in the sand, essentially. And when you cross one, you slip a little deeper and you give a little more ground to the beast within, and you become a little less human.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you literally just pass your character sheet to your storyteller because you have just become a feral monster.
Yep.
And that's one of the big reasons why, I didn't like ever playing the Sabbat.
Yeah.
Because the Sabbat, they give themselves over to the vampirism. Well, it doesn't sound like fun. You've literally taken the whole aspect of feeling bad about doing vampire stuff out of the game.
Right. Now it's just an accepted regular thing.
Yeah, now I'm just doing crazy vampire stuff.
Right. Yeah, and I kind of felt the same way about another one on here, Warhammer. And that was that you had factions that you could play that were basically chaos and evil and horror all the time. And it was like, okay, so why am I doing this other than to just finish the corruption of the world? That's my goal.
Yeah.
I'm already corrupted, so I'm just going to finish off everyone else because there's no better thing to do. Or, I'm here for the fight. The never-ending fight. I will always be here for the fight. So therefore, I'm going to keep fighting.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where dark fantasy can sometimes go too far. with what you're where you go with the character itself.
With regards to like Warhammer Fantasy and 40K and stuff like that, I mean, I think a lot of the story is there to facilitate the board game, the strategy game. I mean, they built a lot of lore around it and stuff like that. So I mean, do you want an honest answer to why would the forces of chaos do what they're doing?
Sure.
So they are literally trying to tear apart reality.
Right.
They are extra-dimensional creatures.
Yep.
And as far as their forces go, a lot of their forces don't have a choice. Simply because they have made their bids for power, or they have been caught in a situation where the only choice they had was to join chaos. And once those hooks are sunk in, the only option really is losing your sanity and your humanity and your, like, basically turning into a weird mutant spawn thing. And at that point, you're just a ravening monster anyways.
Right.
So what do? You hang on to your
Hate?
humanity, you hang on to what little agency you have.
Right.
And try to control it and maybe direct it. Maybe after a little bit, you realize there's no escape. And, I mean, what do you do then?
Right.
You do the best job you can for the boss you've got, so that the suffering is as little as possible.
Okay. All right.
There's I played Nurgle when I played Warhammer Fantasy, and so he's the god of plagues. And so a lot of his people are like, Nurgle will come in and spread plague. You now have 7 different horrible flesh-eating diseases because Nurgle's forces came to town. So, Rob, let me make you an offer. You can either A, die slowly and painfully to the 7 eating flesh-devouring diseases, or I can take all the pain away, but you serve me.
Yeah.
And as long as you serve me, I can make sure that you don't suffer at all.
Okay.
I don't say you're not going to have the 7 flesh-eating diseases anymore. You just won't suffer.
Right. Okay. Fair. Okay. I see where that's coming from. And again, that fits within that word of darkness, is that you're accepting your existence.
And, oh God, what movie was this from? I want to say it was that movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger was fighting the devil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But there's this great line in there where one of his best friends turns up on the side of the devil after a car bomb. He dies in a car bomb, and then all of a sudden he shows up later in the movie, and he's like, "What, you too?" And he's like, "You'd be surprised what you'd agree to when you're on fire."
That's pretty solid. That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We got to talk about Grim Hollow.
Okay.
So, Grim Hollow is a setting based around D&D 5th edition. Not one of the core settings, though. This is Kickstarted. It's a third-party product. Apparently, the Kickstarter was funded in 90 minutes.
Wow.
Like, that's impressive.
Well,
they hit a lot, if not all of their stretch goals, too.
Nice.
So, there's a lot of good Grim Hollow stuff coming out. It's comprised of a setting book and a player's guide.
Okay.
At its core, adds a bunch of new subclasses, a couple new lineages for 2 different races you can play, and a bunch of new monsters.
Okay.
And the world is called Etheris.
Etheris.
Yes, I had to put a pronunciation.
I always want to do Atharsis, but it's Etheris.
Etheris. And basically, it's a dead world that the gods abandoned to darkness.
Ooh.
Yeah, like the gods were like, probably not much to salvage here. We're
Sucks
out.
to be you later.
Deuces.
Yep.
And so the dark just fell in and started preying upon it. And I definitely want to give it a look, man. Like the artwork that I've been seeing coming out for it and stuff like that, and some of the promotional materials. A lot of people I respect in the community have been saying some very good things about it. So I'm gonna give it a look.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that kind of sits with all this, is that bringing something like this to the table, regardless of which one of these we were discussing, is a challenge with your players, is finding out who really is up for this. It may sound like a good idea until you sit down and really start into how dark it is, and then it can get kind of challenging. And I think that becomes, there's definitely interest. Like, I like the idea of dark fantasy. I definitely enjoy playing it at times, but I can say pretty much right now, after all the stress that I've dealt with in 2020 and some of the stuff, I don't know if I'd want to play it soon. I don't know if I'm ready to step into it psychologically to say, yeah, I could go do this now.
I agree. And, for what it's worth, I really like the dark fantasy genre from a distance.
Yeah.
I loved playing Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, Darkest Dungeon, I can't touch that game.
Yeah.
I can't. It's just too much stress.
Yeah.
You have run games before where I've become extraordinarily stressed out just because for one game session, I felt really powerless and really set upon.
Yeah.
And I walked away from the game just feeling like, I can't.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that was good. I don't feel like I accomplished anything. I don't feel good about that story,
And that's unfortunately the truth of dark fantasy.
And make a campaign of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, and this is kind of getting into where, dark fantasy really lies, is the whole concept of contrast. Like I said, we'd come back around to that.
Yes.
The movie, by the way, was End of Days. Thank you, Knox.
Yes, I did see that in the chat.
Just wanted to put that out there on the broadcast for the record for anybody who's listening.
Yeah. Not necessarily good, but fits.
there's a quote that I love. And without getting too heavily into the theological implications of the quote.
Sure.
The quote is Deus est daemon inversus, which is Latin for the devil is God's shadow, or the devil is God upside down, inverted.
Ah, okay. It is the true shadow.
Yes. So putting the idea out there, can light exist but for primeval darkness?
Well, I think darkness in legend said it with, what is light without the dark?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so the idea of contrast in a dark fantasy setting is I think it's really the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can do heroic stuff in a heroic fantasy setting, and it feels normal.
Yeah.
It feels good.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing heroic stuff. You're a hero.
Yeah.
People praise you. You save the girl at the end of the day, and, the kingdom is safe, and you get your fortune, and cool.
Mm-hmm.
In a dark fantasy setting, every act of heroics, every life you save, every monster you thwart, every day you survive against this whole thing feels that much more heroic because everything is dark.
Yeah.
Everything is out to kill you. You're the only one doing these heroics.
Yeah, one of the ways that I was reading, and a good description of it, in my personal opinion, is imagine being in a mine with no light and a box of matches, and every heroic act is a match being struck, and it lights up everything, and you feel better for a couple seconds, and then it burns your fingers, and it dark
goes out,
again.
And it's dark again, yep.
And that's literally dark fantasy. If you're doing it right, that's how it feels. It feels just like a brand new match every time.
Yep.
So,
there's the overwhelming odds.
Mm-hmm.
People like not only the contrast, but they like surviving against the overwhelming odds.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, doing heroic acts in a heroic fantasy setting is normal. You've got normal odds. There's good people around you to support you. You can go to town. You can retire to the tavern at the end of the day, and that tavern is filled with good people who are singing songs and are merry and drunk, and there are, buxom barmaids and etc. You don't get to do that in dark fantasy.
No.
You go to that tavern and the ale is stale, and the Thieves Guild runs it, and the ne'er-do-wells who lurk there, who dare go there,
right,
are staring at you out of the corner of their eye. There's no song.
Right.
There's no happiness.
Right.
There's a fitful rest.
And or you don't have a town. You have the derelict of a town that is broken and burned, and you find the one building that is still roughly standing that you can make it inside to shelter yourself from the wind.
Yeah.
And you may get a moment to close your eyes long enough to be able to get a moment of rest while still feeling the chill. And that is comfort.
Yep. One cold bonfire on a cliffside.
Yeah.
Beset by monsters. And then there's other stuff that's just setting specific.
Yeah.
Some things really work best in a dark fantasy where they would be out of place otherwise. The whole trope of the power vampire lord in his looming castle that terrorizes the countryside.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't put that in a heroic fantasy setting.
You can, but it becomes exceptionally challenging because there's so many things beset against it.
Well, exactly, and that's why you can't do it, because it immediately begs the question, why has nobody done anything about this guy yet?
Exactly.
Like, I had to conquer that problem in some very complex ways to get the plot that I have in my own heroic fantasy game.
Exactly.
And that's just a couple bandit kingdoms getting together and terrorizing some villages in the countryside.
Right.
Why has the Imperial Legion not done anything about this yet?
Right.
Well, they had to compromise a lot of politicians to do it.
Yeah.
And that became a subplot in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
An entire vampire lord terrorizing the countryside wouldn't last. At all.
Right.
In a dark fantasy setting, though, there's nobody to do anything about it. He's the power.
Yeah.
He is the law.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more of that as you see... You get closer and closer at line with fantasies as you start stepping into more fantastical things. I think to a degree, if you look at the Grimm fairy tales, you see the light that those tales tell, but the truth of why those tales exist tells you that it's a dark place. You know, why was there a witch in the woods able to bake children?
Yeah.
Like,
how many
that people
children
knew
do you
about
need
that.
to eat to get a reputation for eating children?
Correct. One where you're not being taken care of, you know, as in, you know, oft. And that's really where you've got to, like, you've got to start, when the questions aren't coming up with answers, or the answers are the people are paid off, when a, let me see if I can put this right, when a sin is the reason why it's allowed to happen. Every time the question is answered, money, power, you know, some kind of sinful turn that has made it available. Now you have stepped into dark fantasy.
Yes.
Now you're accepting that
it's
as
the
a thing.
weakness of man that
There you go. Yeah.
that keeps the darkness fed and well.
Yeah.
It just reminds me a bit of a joke. This guy sitting in a bar, and he says, "You see that man over there?" He points to another patron. He says, "That man is Bob the fence builder. He builds fences. His father before him built fences. His father before him built fences. You see that woman over there? That's Carol, the seamstress. She's the best seamstress in town. Her mother was a seamstress. Her mother before her was a seamstress. But you eat one child."
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, so I mean, I agree that it's very that things that you can get away with in dark fantasy, you really can't do other places nearly as easily. They're not nearly as accessible, and your players don't ask the questions. Why is that vampire lord on the hill? You don't have to answer that question.
It's dark fantasy. You just know.
You've accepted it. You know, why are there werewolves populating the woods?
Because of course there's werewolves populating the woods.
Exactly, you know.
Of course the dark woods are a bad place to be, even during the day, let alone night.
Right, right. When you hear the scream of a child, you know what's going on. You know it's terrible. You know, Timmy didn't fall down the well.
So, I guess all this kind of leads to the question, the obvious question. Why? Why would you ever play dark fantasy? Like Knox was saying, it sounds like Depression, the role-playing game. And I suppose for a lot of people it is. But what's the attraction for people who do like this stuff?
I think for me at the time when I stepped into it was I saw a very rich world that was easy to accept. I knew what was there. I knew what it looked like. It wasn't what we live in. And I think that was an escape on its own. You know, sometimes sci-fi is hard to escape to because there's too many, well, how does that work?
Yeah.
Whereas dark fantasy is, I know how it works, and I already accept the terribleness of it.
Yeah.
You know, and the complexities of it. I'm no longer questioning of why the constable would let any of this happen, or where did all these, you know, monsters come from. They're there because it's dark.
Yeah.
It's because everyone just accepted it, and we've slid themselves into this place. The question is where do I fit into this?
Yeah.
Where do I sit on the scale of darkness? And why am I trying to do something else? And now that answer gets a lot easier. You know, why did I leave my home as a farmer and become a warrior and go out and try and do heroic things in a world where I could have done a fine job being just a farmer and living quietly in a normal fantasy world.
Are you a farmer or are you an hors d'oeuvre waiting?
Well, that's the thing about dark fantasy is that now you have a reason. Now you have a drive. Now you're different, and your drive and passion pushes you into the world. Maybe you were touched by something, whether it be the light, whether it be, a little bit of insanity. Maybe it was something special. Maybe you saw something. Maybe someone drove you to it.
You saw that little flicker of light and it gave you just enough hope.
Or you watched a flicker of light went out and now you're enraged by what took it from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those now have a much stronger sense. Like, you couldn't play that character comfortably at a table with other heroes. Why are you going to this dungeon?
Because I'm really angry that this person died, and I'm going to take vengeance on all these goblins. In a heroic setting, that's like...
That feels very...
Calm down, man.
Exactly, which is where,
tone down the genocide, but in a dark fantasy setting, you're like, kill them.
Yeah.
Kill them all.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that... What's funny, in your game especially, we have a Nord who just saw a dragon.
Yeah.
And he is not having that.
Oh, no.
And the rest of us are all kind of, whoa, hang on, you realize that's going to just destroy you. Instead, in a dark fantasy, we'd all be, if we were all Nords in the dark fantasy known as Skyrim, we all would be like, let's go mess that thing up right now.
Yeah.
I got nothing better to do tonight. So I think that's the key is that not only does the storyteller get that option, but the players get so many more options on how to dig that feeling, how to move into that and accept it and have a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the big things about like dark stories, like same reason, same thing with like horror and such like that, is it's very validating to people with darker aspects of their psychology. Like specifically for me, I can't really speak for anybody else, but I can speak for myself.
Wednesday therapy.
Struggling. I've spoken before with my struggles with depression, and the the trauma that caused that and stuff like that. It can be triggered by darker aspects. You may want to shy away from it, but in small doses, it can be very validating, because for me, the world's not always sunshine and roses.
Yeah.
I've got bad days with dark thoughts. And when I want to tell a story, the stories feel incomplete without a dose of darkness in there. And so I do kind of like to explore that a little bit. And it helps to kind of process some of those darker feelings, some of that darker psychology, and especially being able to do that amongst friends.
Yep.
At a table in the safety of make believe.
Yeah.
With that sort of distance. It's therapeutic.
I agree.
I wouldn't say it's therapy.
It is not,
TM
it is
with a capital T.
It is not therapy, but it is therapeutic. I agree with that. But
it's therapeutic to put those feelings out there, to explore those plot lines in a way that you have that safety of distance from them, and also in a way where you can exert agency over them. And I think that's the important part. There's darkness all around you in real life. Maybe there's darkness all around you in the game, but in the game you have a sword.
True. And I think Nox makes a point that in-game monsters are monsters. In real life, they're people.
Possibly your peers.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that the moment that things get too close to reality and you're questioning the darkness of reality, that's when things where your line gets I'm not so good about this.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's for me at least. That's the big draw of dark fantasy.
Okay.
I like touching the darkness, but from from the safety of that separation.
Yeah,
I will touch the real darkness in my therapy my actual therapy session, not my Wednesday one.
Yep.
But this puts a little balm on it, I think.
Yeah.
I'd
like to hit the questions because we've got good questions, and I think we've got time to make it worthwhile to go through all of them.
Yeah, okay.
Let's open with Nox. When narrating aspects of dark fantasy and horror, do you feel that the perspective and point of view it's told in can make or break that narrative? Are there any point of views we should try to avoid? Are there some that you think would work better than others? I realize some, like a first person, aren't always available, but even if it is, would a different one be preferable? I think I'm going to stick with dark fantasy and not talk about horror, because
Okay.
I think horror definitely has a different feel, and point of view and narration makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
At least from a thematic, like I do cinematic storytelling and narratives.
Yep.
So for me, talking about a grim moment or a grim world, I will take different approaches of it.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of dark fantasy, I think one of the things that got brought up in discussion was the concepts of the fade to black and the veil, is that you know what's happening. You don't have to break that. And I think narration from that point of view, where you step away from the players and you move yourself to the setting that is around the players, and describing it in the sense of sounds and moments that happen. For instance, when the players are walking down or walking into a city, and they're seeing shadows of people moving through things, and maybe those shadows run down an alleyway, and you hear a scream, and slop is being thrown out of windows, and the scent of charcoal and bitter is in the air at all times, and as you make your way to what you believe is probably an inn based on the general smell of food, you get the sense that you are not welcome the moment that you walk in. And that kind of narrative, where you're narrating as their eyes are moving around the space, basically, and accepting these little values, I think makes a huge difference for dark fantasy. Whereas, like, cinematically, I might step away. Like in 7th Sea, I tend to paint the picture from beyond the eyes of the player and into the eyes of what's going on in the world, about, someone being tortured in a tower, and that they're feeling helpless, to set the tone of where the players are going.
Right. You give us establishing shots, essentially. Yeah. Establishing shots, and you give us lots of meanwhiles to kind of paint that picture. But yeah, no, I think the unknown is a very potent tool of horror storytelling.
I agree.
And so I think by tantalizing their senses but not giving them a whole heck of a lot, you let the imagination fill things in, and the imagination can do far worse things than I can.
I agree. I completely agree.
So you talked a little bit about the fade to black and the veils, and I think those are the veil especially is a very powerful tool. And what we're talking about there is describing essentially things that are happening off screen, out of sight,
camera, out of sight. Yeah.
So one of the ideas that came up in the Discord, and I really liked this description, was you want to get across the idea that the noble that the heroes are visiting is torturing people, and imply that could be their fate if they cross him as well, right? Now you have them walking down a hall, and they glance in and they see a man strapped to some sort of a table with an attendant there with him. Now conventional wisdom says you see this man being tortured, but like, do you really want to sit there and describe a torture scene?
No.
That's horrific. Like, you don't even want to put yourself in that mental place to be able to describe that.
Correct.
So what you do is you veil it. You say, you walk past, you catch a quick glimpse of a man, shirtless, with his arms and legs tied on the table. There's a man standing above him, smiling with you think it's a knife, but you're not sure, but that's all you see. Someone closes the door behind you. You were never supposed to have seen that.
Right.
Your guide continues down the hall, and of course over here you see the tapestries hanging from the wall from the third era of, and screams start echoing down the hall.
Muffled screams, yeah.
Your guide makes a sour sour-looking face and begins describing the vase from the second era.
Yes. And or even more impactful than that is the concept that you have the main villain, after pontificating and drinking and eating with you, step back, and say, I have another guest here, unfortunately, that I'm going to have to attend to. I do hope that you guys enjoy the dessert. I will not be able to, enjoy that course with you. And as they step down the stairwell, you can hear shouting until a door creaks open, and you just hear the words, no, no, until the door closes and muffled and turns into screams.
You know something horrible is happening. Yeah. You don't ever have to describe it. And like I said, your players' imaginations will do far more devious and awful things than you can ever describe.
Exactly. So point of view is important, and stepping between what the players are envisioning and then what they might be coming to or leaving are always good things for those pieces. Mm-hmm. So, Overwatch had one in here. Pick a high fantasy setting, game system, or franchise. Would switching it to a dark, low fantasy change it fundamentally? If so, how?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it would always change it fundamentally.
I think if you took something like, let's go with something giant that everyone's aware of, Zelda.
Zelda, yeah.
If the world of Zelda / Link, that dude Zelda, was grim instead, I think it would gloriously change it.
Yeah, it's always kind of verged on that a little bit.
But he's always heroic.
There's always light at the end of the day.
He's the one coming to save the day, even if he screws it up or was too late or let things happen because he didn't show up at the right time.
He saves the princess, gets the Triforce, and Ganon is defeated for another cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Just to happen again.
Yeah.
The other one that I was thinking of was kind of The Witcher puts you in a dark fantasy to a degree with an odd heroic figure, who's the one dark point in the story. I
would actually say The Witcher's probably already dark fantasy.
It is, but it isn't, because he is part of the darkness. And most of the people there, when
doesn't change anything.
Well, no. But he's not the hero bringing the light out. Mm-hmm. Everyone sees him as the darkness when he walks in the room.
Yeah, he's probably the only sane person, maybe.
I think that is a great statement.
Who's seeing things clearly there. But no, I think The Witcher's already dark fantasy. I don't think that's even a valid, like, you're not doing anything to
No, I wasn't saying to change it or anything like that. It kind of sat in my head as one of those things.
Okay, so like I kind of as a thought exercise want to take my favorite setting, the Elder Scrolls. God, I'm making that like dark fantasy.
Honestly, I don't think it would change that one much. I really don't, because I think it's on the edge of it.
I don't know, like...
Dude, every time I walk around in ESO, some dude is messing with some other dude because of some corruption, and you find out that everyone involved was gray in some way. That they were dealing with their own BS. There's a lot of political and manipulation that happens. You're finding somebody on the road who's asking for help. Then you find out that person really wasn't asking for help. They were on their way to do something something generally almost terrible.
Okay, I mean, look, that's okay.
Common.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that's there for an MMO.
I understand that.
You've got a very relatively small game world. I mean, you could fit all of Tamriel in Michigan.
I understand that.
Even as vast as it is.
Right.
Probably in Greater Detroit, you could probably do it, and you've got a population density.
Sure.
So of course it's around every corner. You can't, you trip over people getting to quests. I'm just talking about like the bigger story points, like... Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind.
Sure.
The sixth house, House Dagoth, and the Dreamers Awakening and such like that. And there's some real Lovecraftian stuff that goes on there.
No, I agree.
Like, there's a bunch of NPCs that are all having like weird dreams and stuff like that. They're like getting weird mutations, tentacles growing out of their faces and stuff.
Sure.
Like, it's already kind of close, but at the end of the day, it's revealed that you are the Nerevarine. You are the reincarnation of Indoril Nerevar. Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert, by the way, for a 15-year-old game.
Yeah.
And you are able to overthrow Dagoth and you are able to reclaim the Heart of Lorkhan and stuff like that. And you kind of win the day at the end of the day.
Sure,
you save Morrowind.
But at the same time, you look at something like, and I agree. But I think the gray is there. Your character in Skyrim starts out in a cart, being carted to their death because you don't know why.
Because the Imperials are incompetent.
Okay, but at the same time, everyone is kind of downtrodden. everyone is worried about what's going on there.
Yeah.
That bad things have just recently happened. So I'm saying it's on the edge. Shifting it over wouldn't be much.
I don't know if Skyrim is a great example, though. Like
it's Elder Scrolls.
Well, no. But here's the thing, though, is that Skyrim is, if you look at the timeline, Skyrim is a post-apocalyptic game.
Kind of, yeah. I would agree with that.
Elder Scrolls 4 is what you need to be talking about.
Sure. But at the same time, all of this sits within that world, and I think it is close.
Yeah.
And I think pushing it over the line really wouldn't change it.
You just got to make the shadows a little bit darker.
That's it. Yeah.
The Daedra a little more present, and the nobles in charge a little more unscrupulous.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's a very small shift.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I would say of those two,
That's fair.
Whereas Zelda would be a huge shift, Elder Scrolls really not that big of a shift.
I don't think Zelda's as far of a shift as you think it is.
I think it would fundamentally change the conversations with pretty much every major character in it.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much, because even the dark characters who are a little crazy are still there to see something change.
Yeah,
in a positive direction.
I guess maybe I'm just thinking of like Wind Waker and stuff like that.
Right.
Wind Waker was a very colorful game, but like it was also very oppressive in that like.
I think the color shifted away from the oppression.
Yeah,
I think that's what gave it a little bit of a better thing to get into.
Twilight Princess was a thing too.
Oh yeah, that's true. So, Dark Chicken Storm. Now I want to play Mad Max mod of Skyrim. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you conceive of the Oblivion Crisis as the apocalypse, which it was very much for a lot of people.
All right, one more in here before we run out of time. The Mad Elf, dark, grimdark, horror, gritty. What are the difference for each of these?
Okay, so dark is the bad guys are the default, and gray is as good as it gets.
And any light is very much striking.
Grimdark, you're probably the bad guys too.
Yep. Yeah, you've joined the bad guys, but you're doing it for different reasons.
Yeah, and it may even just be just as horrible, but you know.
You're either being forced to do it, or you're stuck doing it.
Or yep. Horror.
You're on the run.
You're the hunted,
you're
not
prey.
the hunter.
Yeah, you're no longer the hero. You're the prey.
And gritty. I think we talked about this the last time or a time before, and that's gritty is basically just reality's harsh.
Yeah. Yeah, it harshes everything.
It's not that there's any evil present. It's just that reality is harsh.
Yeah,
and being an adventurer is hard.
Yeah, and I think you can gritty up even, bright fantasy and make it something that people just don't want to play because they're no longer escaping.
Yeah,
it's just gritty and challenging.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's where we push ourselves to dark is when we're talking dark fantasy. We're talking about a distinct difference between light and dark, and that the darkness has the control.
Yes.
And hope is something that is not even a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a word that is spoken. It's not a feeling. Whereas if you step into something a bit more like grimdark, you've accepted where things are at.
Yes.
And
you're probably playing along with it.
So next week we have a system spotlight.
Yeah, second Wednesday of the month.
Yes, and you're going to do Legend of the Five Rings.
We are going to do Legend of the Five Rings.
All right,
Legend of the Five Rings.
I will go do some digging because it's been a while, a really long while since I've looked at that.
It's been a while for me too, so it's going to be a learning experience for all of us. But
in a strange way, it is connected to 7th.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit there to be talked to.
That's the gift we give our listeners, though. We do all that digging so that they don't have to.
That's right. So hopefully we'll be able to take you guys on this adventure and and teach you a bit more like we try and do every week.
All right. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, on Instagram at ST_conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave, and join us up on our Discord. We have that up on our Twitter feed pretty often, and you can also find the link to Discord at storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially our named members, Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, and Hulavu for joining us.
Thank you, Hulavu.
You guys make it so much easier for us to do this every single week and keep this thing going, so please join our Patreon. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. If you were listening a little bit early, you heard them. That's patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music, Beyond the Warriors, is by Guy Frog. You can can find that at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. And our outro music, which you're hearing now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/treks.
As always, a big shout out to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving us and
Thank you.
supporting us. All of our friends who've sat with us at our table over the years to share all these great experiences with you, and you, every single one of our listeners.
Yes.
We love you so much.
Love you guys.
Stay safe. Good night.